So thanks a lot for taking the time to join us today. We are grateful that we had an opportunity to work with you all in working together on this initiative on decentralization in Africa. And we appreciate your understanding because it's been a tricky year, and we were very much excited to host all of you in Cape Town in June, but due to the COVID-19, we were unable to do that. However, we thought it would be prudent for us to just use the opportunity to bring us all together in a socially distanced way to be able to have a meet and greet session, so at least we get to know each other, since now we'll be working together for slightly almost 2 years now that COVID decided to extend the period for more than a year. So we also thought it would be important for us to take the opportunity also to discuss a subject that is of mutual interest to all of us, and that is decentralization in Africa, and particularly how COVID-19 has impacted decentralization in various countries in Africa. So other than the hosting institutions, which is the Dalla Omar Institute at the University of the Western Cape, and the Center for Federalism and Governance Studies at the University of Addis Ababa University, we have with us today our funding partners, the Kenya and South African offices of the Hans Seidel Foundation and the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. And in addition to that, we have the participants who we had selected for the African School on Decentralization for this year. We had selected a total, we got over almost 700 applications. We selected about 25 from different African countries, and out of the 25 today, we had a confirmation of about 19 participants who were to join us today from 19 different countries in Africa. So thank you, and thanks for making time to be here today. My name is Henry Paul Gichana, and I will be your moderator today alongside my colleague, Dr. Michelle Mazuiza. And I will just project our program so that at least we get to, I'll just share the program so we get to understand how we will be running this. So just before I share the program, basic housekeeping rules. One, we will be recording this session. Therefore, if at all any one of us has any reservations regarding the recording, we request you please let us know in the chat section, and we will ensure that once we are done with the recording and are uploading to our website, we will take measures to ensure that your reservations are taken into account. The other thing is, for good order, we request that all of us keep our videos off and our microphones off at the same time, just to ensure that we are giving the person who's speaking an opportunity to do that. And you are allowed to have your video on if you are the one speaking. And if you are speaking and probably you have a connectivity problem, we suggest that you try and switch off your video to see if that enhances your connectivity. So as part of our program today, we have 6 sessions. The first session was basically for our hosts, for a chance for you to be able to meet our hosts, the hosting institutions, and our funding partners, which was supposed to go up to around 2:15. Then after that, we want to have an introduction to the participants, where each one of them will get an opportunity to introduce themselves in about a minute or so and just tell us how COVID has impacted their work. And then the third session will be presentations, basically the formal part of this discussion, and looking at how COVID-19 has impacted various countries and various systems of decentralization in various countries in Africa. Then after that, we'll have a question and answer session where you will be able to raise any questions that are not limited to what has been discussed that can cover even questions about the general hosting of the program and anything else that you may be curious to hear from us. After the question and answer session, we will have a monitoring and evaluation session. This is basically us now coming back to you and asking you, now that you've been part of this session, you've been part of this event, what has been your opinion about it? And we will be sharing a link in the chat section at the time, and you will be allowed some 5 minutes to just click on the link and then go and answer just a few questions, about a page and a half of just clicking options. And then now we will be able to get your feedback and hopefully work on it to ensure that we have a better session next time. And then lastly, we will be concluding with what our plans will be for next year. So just running straight into the first session, I would like to welcome the Professor Nico Statler, who is the South African Research Chair on Multi-Level Government and Development, and who has been the project head for this project, the African School on Decentralization, from inception, for him to give his opening remarks. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. It's really quite a remarkable time for us, the first occasion that we meet as the African School on Decentralization, and unfortunately it's virtual, but virtual is better than no school. So thanks for sharing up your time on a Friday afternoon on this, I think, fairly ambitious project to work with my colleague and partner, Dr. Zimmerlach, at the Center for Federal and State Governance Studies in Addis Ababa University, and you will hear from me more in a bit. So, as Conrad, as Henry said, the aim is to get to know each other. This is not a replacement, but just sort of a meet and greet. Before next year, we will gather again, and in real time and with real people in a real place called Cape Town, and that you would be able to enjoy our hospitality on that occasion. It's really fantastic to see a number of you coming from various countries, spread from the north, from Egypt, right down to Botswana, South Africa, you know, and right from the west to the east, covering the expanse of the continent. And we're all concerned basically about decentralization. And decentralization is for us a critical aspect and a governance form that would assist Africa to develop economically and socially. And that's why we are putting this effort on to see, through a common understanding from training and learning from each other, we could advance the issues pertaining to decentralization. Today's topic could not have been anything else but COVID. We are here virtually because of COVID, and we must reflect on how did it and still continue to impact on our work in decentralized forms of government, whether at the national, central, a provincial or state level, or at local government level. We're also very happy to have with us our partners who assist us from the international community. Henry has already mentioned the Hans Seidel Foundation. Particularly pleased to have Hans Boyle and Karen April here from South Africa. They have been very interested in our project, worked with us as we continued, and we will also share some thoughts or hear from them in a moment. But the project obviously is really much thankful for their support across, from last year right up till now, and hopefully next year as well. Then we've also got the office, the Hans Seidel Foundation, the office in Kenya, where Robertson Kabucho is also here, and Zemlak will speak at the moment about him. Then the also very welcome to the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. It's a real long-standing partnership that we have with the forum, and Professor Jaap de Visser will perhaps say a word about the work of the forum. But we also have very fortunate to have Nyasa Simba Nagavi here to say a few words on behalf of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, who's, as the name suggests, it's local government, decentralization, and their very strong presence in Commonwealth Africa. Just the last word that I'd like to say is the team behind African School of Decentralization. You've already met Henry. He's the man that really drives the process. So thank you very, Henry, much that we are here today and the project has matured. Also, Michelle Maziwisa, who will be hosting and moderating a second half of the program. I'd also like to mention Gertie Stevens and Pumla Mhlati. She will also be speaking, and behind the scenes, Mandy and Kay for putting up this our virtual conference or webinar so that we can talk to each other. So with that, let me then hand over to the director of the Dalla Omar Institute, Dr. Jaap, Professor Jaap de Visser.
Thank you very much, Nico. Welcome, everyone. Good to see all of you. Thanks, Henry, for kicking off the meeting, and thanks, Nico, for the opening remarks. So my task is very simple: to also welcome you on behalf of the Dalla Omar Institute at the University of the Western Cape. This is a wonderful occasion because I think, despite the misery that COVID-19 brings us, in strange ways, it also has opened new opportunities and brought us together in new ways. So I'm now quite excited to be in a meeting with Zemelak Ayele again after a long time. We haven't seen each other, and to see people from across the continent represented here, it actually is also, yeah, a testimony to the resilience of I think all of us during this pandemic. So I think Nico has already given a wonderful opening remarks, so I want to be very brief, but just to emphasize that this is a product of a network of people on the continent interested in decentralization, concerned about decentralization. And many of them have somehow found their way at one point in time to the Community Law Center, or what's now called the Dalla Omar Institute. Many of us here in this virtual room have spent many hours in the institute, debating, discussing at the coffee machine about the nature of decentralization on the continent. And it's that through that scholarship, the idea was also born to start this African School on Decentralization. And as Nico indicated, a lot of credit goes to Henry for raising the idea and following it through and actually delivering us to this point, which still, despite the fact that we're not having the physical meeting, I still think it's a major milestone that we have come this far and have this group together and have this network already established of practitioners interested in decentralization and improving decentralization for development on the continent. So thanks to everyone for joining in. I'm looking forward to this afternoon's discussions, and welcome to our partners, HSF, CLGF. Yesterday morning, I attended the CLGF board meeting, which I normally am not able to attend because it's usually in a far-flung place far away from me. And this time I could attend because of the fact that it had to be done virtually. And it was great to see CLGF's commitment to decentralization on the continent, which also comes through in their support for this effort. And of course, HSF as the main sponsor of the school. We owe a great deal of gratitude to you also for your flexibility, because of course everything was turned upside down when the lockdown and the pandemic broke out, but you've been remarkably flexible in working with us through this unusual time. So thanks again, looking forward to the proceedings, and maybe now it's time to hand over to my friend and colleague in Ethiopia, Zemalak. Over to you.
Sorry, I think maybe I need to interrupt a bit to just mention something. I forgot to say that each of us in the first session, we have 2 minutes. So please, let's try and keep that time to ensure that we move according to our schedules. Welcome, Zamila. Thank you. Zamila, please unmute yourself.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, my computer decided to update itself when I was starting to Zoom. Now I'm using my phone to speak to you. Anyways, thank you very much, Henry, and thank you very much, Yab and Nico, for organizing this. My name is Zamalak Yele. I'm a former student of all the people that you see here, Professor Yab Dafisa and Professor Nico Statler. I am a graduate of the Dala Omar Institute. I heard and learned about decentralization for the first time when I joined the former Community Law Center, now Dala Omar Institute, as a master's student. And I acquired this interest in decentralization and federalism. Now, all I think and talk about is federalism and decentralization. Now I'm the director of the Center for Federalism and Governance Studies of Addis Ababa University. Before as a student, now as a colleague, we have been working for over now 9 years with guys. And we have done a lot before, a lot of conferences, a lot of publications, and we wanted to take this relationship up, and now we decided to launch African School of Decentralization. We were hoping to meet you in person, but COVID did not allow it. Still, it's a good idea that Henry came up with this idea of doing Zoom and meeting you guys. It's a great initiative. So I'm not going to talk much. Just I wanted to say thank you and welcome. Thank you, Henry.
Thanks a lot, Zamilak. I take the chance to invite Hans Bulla. I don't know whether he has joined us yet. Welcome, Hans.
Hi, Henry.
Hi,
Hello.
Hans.
Hello, everyone. It's great seeing you. Thank you very much for participating in this session, and congratulations, I think, to everyone for being, as I've just learned, chosen out of 700. I think is already an achievement in itself. My name is Hans Bühler. I'm the resident representative of the German Hans Seidel Foundation based in South Africa, in Cape Town. And maybe allow me just to explain very briefly what the Hans Seidel Foundation is and why we are involved in the project. The Hans Seidel Foundation is a fully public funded organization. We are entrusted with a mandate by the German Federal Parliament, and our core task in a nutshell is to promote rule of law and sustainable structures, mostly back home in Germany, but also worldwide in over 100 projects in more than 50 countries. The Hans Seidel Foundation's headquarters is based in Munich. And you all know Munich is not only home to the best soccer club in the world, as we have just learned recently, but I think also the capital of Bavaria. And Bavaria is one of those 16 provinces forming Germany. And Germany, and some of you might know this, is therefore a federalized and a decentralized country. And this is also the reason why we as Hans Seidel Foundations try to share experience, learn from others, and support decentralized structures worldwide. And it is therefore also a great pleasure to see Semelak and Nico and Jaap, with whom we are now working for a couple of years together. And I think this project is quite a success, especially in these times of crisis. I don't want to be long, but I think only a few thoughts on this topic. Of course, we were all supposed to meet in person, but who thought 6 months ago that we are able to get so many African countries together in an online seminar? So it's really, really appreciated that the UWC, together with the Addis Ababa University, are able to get you all together online. And then I think it's also fair to say that COVID-19 will change the world as we know it. And you are all decision makers from all sectors, as I've seen, and I think that you're all facing an unprecedented crisis. And the pandemic is hitting Europe hard, but I think it's hitting Africa much harder when we look at the economic impact. Inequality and poverty is certainly increasing. But we also think that we need concerted efforts to use this opportunity. The pandemic maybe also gives us to build back better. I think those decentralized structures, they become in the future maybe even much more important when we talk about crisis response and how to develop our countries. One question we have to answer, for example, here in South Africa, and I think Professor Jaap de Visser will allude to this, is how can we stabilize the local government structures when revenues will further decrease? How can we really make local government structures sustainable in times of economic crisis? Or is this even possible? And maybe a last thought from my side is that at this historic time, in a way, maybe also good governance at all levels appears to be particularly important. Those countries who achieve good governance seem to be able to tackle the crisis in maybe a more successful way. And then last but most importantly, please allow me to express my gratitude to the UWC and to the Addis Ababa University, to the Dula Omar Institute for cooperating with us. And I look forward to the ideas and the concepts which will be shared now. And then I really look forward to see you soon, everyone here in Cape Town. I hope next year. Thank you very much. I know that those were not 2 minutes. It's very un-German, sorry.
It's all right. Thank you very much for the time and your comments. I take the chance to welcome Robertson Kabucho from HSL Kenya. As Robertson hands on, I just take the chance to also just remind us that please switch off your video if you are not speaking, and your audio as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. I take this chance to thank everyone, the organizers of the African School of Decentralization, Professor Nico Statler, Professor Jaap, Dr. Semelak, and all the colleagues that I have been meeting every year for the last about 4 years in Addis in the regular conferences. It's a wonderful time to see you again. My name is Robertson Kafusho. I'm the head of programs at the Kenya office of Hans Seidel Foundation. I'd like to convey the greetings of our resident representative, Ms. Uta Stashevsky, who is currently on leave and was not able to join us. It's a pleasure to also see Hans and Karin, my colleagues from the South Africa office. It's a pleasure to see you in this forum. Great, I take this opportunity to commend the organizers, all the partners, for being agile during this period to gather the selected scholars for this get-together. As we have all experienced in our countries, that no one has been immune at all, whether it's individuals, institutions, governments, from this pandemic that was unprecedented. And that lack of precedence and minimal preparedness has created and minimal preparedness that has manifested. It has created the need for faster response, and therefore a seeming clash of policy, action, and mandate between national governments and regional ones. Therefore, it is very commendable that you thought of carrying out a segmentation and looking at the COVID impact on decentralization as a specific issue. And I therefore look forward to listening to the presentations of the different countries, case studies, as well as the engagement thereafter. So our work in this region is in the focus areas of rule of law and good governance, youth and gender, sustainable economic development, and climate change, whereby we support local, state, and non-state partners in those aforementioned areas. And our office in Nairobi covers work in Kenya and in Ethiopia. At least Hans has spared me the effort of telling me about Hans Adler Foundation. At least he's done a good job in letting me know about the scope of the organization right from our head office in Munich. I therefore believe that the session will generate useful insights for all relevant actors, and I wish everyone a very fruitful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robertson. I now welcome Nyasha Simbanegavi from the Commonwealth Local Government Forum.
Hello.
Hello, Nyasha. We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Henry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, let me just, my feature. Sorry about that. On behalf of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, we are also pleased to be part of the School on Decentralization initiative and part of this webinar. It is good to see colleagues in one place during this very difficult time where we are fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. And we appreciate your presence this afternoon. Let me take this opportunity to thank you, Henry, Professor Nico Statler, Professor Yap Divisa, and colleagues for putting together this event, which I think is very important given the role that subnational governments play in promoting development, service delivery, and now in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think we all know that the pandemic has highlighted or emphasized the importance of decentralization and good local governance. And this webinar is timely and appropriate. And we are pleased to be part of this initiative. Let me just share a little bit about who CLGF is. And hopefully I'll be able to do this within this, the time that has been given. So the Commonwealth Local Government Forum is an organization that promotes and strengthens effective democratic local government across the Commonwealth. It also facilitates exchange of good practice in local government structures and service delivery. We obviously have our headquarters in London, and we have regional offices in Southern Africa, West Africa, in South Asia, the Pacific, and the Caribbean regions. CLGF is a unique organization in that it brings individual councils, associations of local governments at the regional and national levels, ministries responsible for local government, universities, and professional organizations. And the organization also promotes the partnership between central and local government. Our work focuses on three main areas, which are networking, localizing the SDGs, and promoting local democracy. And we do this around four main activity areas. The first one being advocacy, where CLGF represents its members to international organizations like the Commonwealth heads of nations, to the United Nations, the European Union, around global local government policy issues. We also implement programs, and our programs are focusing on improving service delivery, promoting decentralization, local economic development, and also promoting women to participate in public and economic sectors. And we really look forward to sharing our experiences during this initiative. We're programming in Southern Africa, East Africa, and West Africa. And we also have colleagues who are part of this who are going to share their experiences in programming. CLGF also works with universities and training institutions to generate knowledge and to promote good practice across its members. And we do this through our Knowledge Hub and the Commonwealth Journal on Local Governance. And finally, CLGF promotes networking across its members. And we do have networks around the Commonwealth Women in Local Government. We also have a network of cities, and obviously, lastly, the network of research and academics. And the University of the Western Cape is a member of the academic network. And as I think Yap has already highlighted that, the University of the Western Cape also sits on the CLGF board. We are very excited to be part of this initiative, and we look forward to learning and to sharing with you all. I thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nyasha, and we appreciate the support of each of our partners, without whom we won't be here. And we hope that we can be able to count on your support going forward. And I believe that our participants from various countries in Africa now understand the kind of work that you do around decentralization in Africa. And just in case they have projects that will be of interest to you, I'm sure they will be ready and happy to come and work with you. Now we move on to the second session, which is a very important session, especially in view of what the African School on Decentralization seeks to do. And that is mutual learning, peer learning, getting to know what's happening in the various countries across Africa and what we can be able to learn from each other. So I would want to welcome all the participants from all countries, and I want to invite us to take a minute. Please try and keep your comments as brief as you can. It's difficult. Just tell us your name, the institution, the country you are from, the institution you're working at, and the position that you hold in the institution, and a statement on how COVID-19 has impacted your work. So please, I wish I could call out the names, but let's just have whoever is ready to start. Charles Chunga from Malawi. In case Charles Chunga is still connecting, can we have Ebenezer Afriye Boadi from Ghana? Ebenezer, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me, Henry?
We can hear you now, Ebenezer.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to use this opportunity to thank the organizers for putting this event together. Actually, I'm very grateful to be part of this great initiative. My name is Ebenezer Afriye Boadi, and I'm joining this event from Sugakope, where I work as a municipal budget analyst of the Southern District Assembly in the Volta region of Ghana. Aside my work, I'm very passionate about promoting youth participation in local governance especially in the area of budget planning, budget execution, monitoring, and performance reporting. I wish to do so by translating technical budget volumes and report to simple formats that can be easily understood by the local citizens. Now to the COVID. In fact, this year alone, we have to revise or adjust our budget 3 times. Actually, every year we do that once, mid-year, but because of COVID, we had to revise our budget 3 times to accommodate the various directives to the local assemblies in the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we received various directives from central government to make those provisions. And this really affected our programming. Some capital projects that were planned for execution in the budget had to suffer, have to make way for those directives to be accommodated. And so there were also shortfalls in revenue. The GIZ, under the Support for Decentralization Reforms Program, were assisting us in the area of property rate mobilization, property rate and business permit revenue collection. But because of COVID, we lost a lot of revenue from there. Most of our targets were not achieved. I would also want to say that because of the COVID pandemic, we were unable to engage our stakeholders physically in a town hall meeting that we usually do to disseminate reports on the Assembly's plan and budget performance and other programs. So we had to resort to virtual means, which had its own challenges. We couldn't also engage our stakeholders in the fixing of fees to be charged in 2021. And so these are some of the few challenges that we had. General Assembly session meetings could not come on. Subcommittee meetings were held virtually, and it had its own challenges. So Henry, these are some of the few challenges that we had as a country. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for sharing the challenges from Ghana. Now we move on to Rosemary Njaramba from Kenya. Rosemary? Can we have Abidemi Adeoye from Nigeria?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Abidemi.
Yeah, I'm Abidemi Adeoye from Nigeria. I work with Governometrics, a non-governmental organization dedicated to working with citizens in order to create active grassroots citizens. It's quite instructive that in Nigeria and perhaps many African countries, citizens are often very passive about governance. And so that aids a lot of mismanagement in government, lack of active citizens. So what we are doing is creating a breed of active citizens who would take a lot of interest in local governance in their communities. We believe active citizenry will actually help combat a lot of ills that are presently found within the local government system in Nigeria. And some of these ills include voters' apathy, lack of transparency and accountability, as well as a disconnect between elected council holders and citizens. So we believe active citizenry will actually go out to vote when it's time to elect their council leaders. They would actually go the extra mile of asking questions from their elected council holders and make use of all available opportunities and means to engage their council office holders. So that's what we're doing. And the impact of COVID-19 for us has been negative, but we are on the positive side. COVID-19 has exposed quite a lot of things to us, especially to the people, because a lot of times the citizens' focus are usually on the federal government and the state governments. Then COVID-19 came in, and then they observed that the state government do not even know that some marketplaces exist within communities. Now, how do they get to disinfect such public places, thereby reducing the spread, community spread of COVID-19? Now, these marketplaces are known to local government officials, but most of them are not even known to state governments. And so if state government goes on a disinfection spray across the state, they will actually miss some of those places. And so this has brought to the forefront in our national discourse on the effects on the importance of local government in Nigeria. And so that's a positive one for us. So many people are now paying close attention to local governments. And on the other side, on the flip side, COVID-19, especially the social distancing, has actually affected most of our activities, as we are unable to organize a lot of local council meetings that should have been held prior to elections. In fact, during the thick of COVID-19, 2 local government elections were held in 2 states in Nigeria, but we are unable to actively participate through council meetings and local government debates because of COVID-19. But we hope going forward, the easing of the lockdown and reopening of the economy will make progress. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Bidemi. I will remind us that we have a chat section where you are free to type up any questions you may have regarding the session or regarding any thing that has been said so far in the session. And you're also allowed to, ask any questions that you may have. So I take this chance to welcome Mileva. I see you've already told us about yourself and the impact, but nonetheless would like to hear from you. Mileva from Cameroon.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me in this session. Sorry, I can't put the video on right now. Sorry. So I hope you can just get me and
we can hear you.
Just want to say, okay, good. Just want to say a few things about how I was affected personally at the personal level by the pandemic. I'm a Cameroonian. I'm a young female researcher in different topics, different development-related topics like resource governance, local development, decentralization, global governance. And so I have lots of studies I've been carrying out. So I couldn't go to the field because my field of study includes the Adamawa region of Cameroon and the Eastern region. So I couldn't follow my planned trip to these regions. And at different level, we were affected in this country. At the level of the institutions, maybe if you want to have like an authorization to go to each area, you are really constrained by the fact that we have to, there was like a global lockdown in major towns of the country. So that's how we were really paralyzed by the situation. So I once more thank the organizers of this session and the different panelists, and I'm looking forward to having a very exciting session with you. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Mileva. We hope that the situation will be able to allow you to do the field work over time. I was also one of the people who was also supposed to undertake a field work in Kenya regarding my research, but I was also held back by the COVID situation. So Apollo from Eswatini. Apollo? He's still...
Can you hear me now, Henry?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Apollo Mapalala from the Kingdom of Eswatini. I am managing a municipality on the southern part of Eswatini. It's called Nhlangano Town Council. We have a 3-tier system for the management of urban local authorities in the Kingdom of Eswatini. And maybe I'll go straight to the impact, particularly the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in our operations. I think I'll only mention some of the problems and challenges that we face through COVID-19, are quite common to what the other colleagues have shared. But I'll highlight two. The first one is the intergovernmental fiscal transfer arrangements. The central government, because it has had to divert a lot of resources from normal programs to the COVID-19 prevention programs. So we are now struggling. The resources that we are supposed to be getting from central government, the normal obligations as part of the intergovernmental fiscal transfer arrangements, we are struggling to get those, and it really affects our programming, our capital projects, and our normal operations. The second thing relates to resource mobilization from property tax, because a great bulk of our annual budgets come from property tax. I think Ebenezer from Ghana has highlighted the issue of the property tax frustrations. When everybody else is struggling with health issues, it becomes difficult to track or even cause people to pay their property taxes. So our capital projects and normal programming or even operations are severely affected. But I'm really excited to be part of this initiative, Henry, and we are hoping to learn from our colleagues throughout the African continent as to how they've been managing this thing. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Apollo. Now we move on to Joseph Gang Akich from Southern Sudan. From South Sudan, not Southern Sudan. Joseph? If Joseph is not available at the moment, we move on to Egypt. Mohibede.
So Henry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Hi everybody. I am Mohibed from Cairo, Egypt. I am working for Egyptian Ministry of Agriculture and Land Reclamation at rural sector, the rural development sector. I am working as a junior manager, as a deputy of the general director of sustainable livestock production department affairs. Regarding the COVID-19 situation in Egypt, unfortunately, till now, there are about 100,000 confirmed infected cases in Egypt and about 5,000 dead people. I think the increased number of COVID-19 in Egypt is due to failure of implementing of social distancing completely, and there is a shortage in doctors, nurses, and medical supplies as global pandemic has stretched the health system in Egypt beyond its limits. Regarding the impact of COVID-19 on the Egyptian governmental decentralization plans represented in the decentralization plans of the Egyptian Ministry of Planning and Local Development, I think COVID-19 has a very bad and negative impact on decentralization plans on Egypt, as due to bad economic consequence of the COVID-19. There is a shortage in Egyptian governmental funding needed to enhance the capacity of local governorates and Egyptian districts in dealing with local development issues and gradual shift towards decentralization. Finally, I am glad to join this meeting and hope to meet you all in person after ending of the global pandemic. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mohi. We move on to Vivian Dus from Tanzania.
What? Again?
Thank you,
Please.
Mohi. We are moving on to our next participant, Vivian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vivian. Sorry, I'll turn on a video in like 2 seconds. From Tanzania, Arusha, and I am a project manager for a post-school success program in a charity organization, but I'm also an academia. Yeah, I'm an academia, and I am a legal facilitator for international trade. Now, yeah, I was trying to run away from, because it's Friday and I work at a school and they've already started booming drums. It's a happy day. Anyway, just to join the discussion where my colleagues have already shown their gratitude, I'm really excited for getting an opportunity to be part of this great initiative, but I'm also very, very keen to kind of learn how decentralization would help in the areas of, you know, improving international trade in our local communities. More challenge-wise, I know most of my African colleagues have shared some of the challenges, but I wouldn't like to complain a lot, because I think Tanzania, we have had it a little bit fair. So we haven't been hit as badly. And from the education perspective, I think we are slowly getting back to the normal day. We're slowly getting back. We're actually starting to apply for new cohorts for universities. Students are already going back, and you know, life is normal. Prevention measures are still taking place. One thing that I'm really curious about would be to try and see the centralized funding, especially on the education sector. Now in Tanzania, higher education students always receive funding, but the way COVID has hit and the funding has been all kind of been migrated to COVID prevention, it is quite interesting to see how we will be able to bounce back and keep on supporting our scholars. I'm really excited to hear from the professors and the presenters that are going to present. And like I said, the decentralization aspect is speaks to me more on international trade, understanding that Tanzania has a lot of SMEs and waiting for the centralized action for how we could improve international trade is a little bit a very slow process. So it would be really exciting to kind of gauge on what could be done to make it better. Thank you so much, Henry.
Thanks a lot, Vivian. Now we move on to your neighbor in the North, Kenya. Rosemary, are you available now?
Yes, I'm on the call. Henry, I'm on the call.
Please proceed.
Hello, my name is Rosemary Njaramba. I work in Kenya. I'm from Kenya. I work at the Council of Governors. The Council of Governors is an intergovernmental relations body that brings together the two levels of government. We have two levels. We have the national government here, and we have the county governments, 47 county governments. So the Council of Governors is the body that brings together the two levels for purposes of consultation and considering matters of common interest. I am at the Council of Governors, I'm the head of legal, which does quite a bit of policy and legislative development, analysis and review. I think the other question was how COVID has impacted on the country. Immediately we had our first case in March. As government, we were requested to work from home. So a lot of government work is happening virtually. We have our meetings through Zoom or WebEx. The only physical meetings that are allowed to happen are very few. And in those meetings, we have to be about less than 10 people in a room, and we have to have masks. So that's how work is happening at in Kenya. Even our parliamentary sittings at the Senate, at the National Assembly happen, only few members are allowed. Even our committee meetings with Parliament also happen virtually. County governments have had to really adjust to the pandemic. Public participation is very key here, especially when it comes to planning and budgeting. And we have just started the financial year. That means that this is when the planning starts. So a lot of the public participation on budgets and on annual development plans is happening virtually. So a lot of that also is happening virtually. The two levels of government have a national coordinated response for COVID. We have a national emergency committee that is made up of representatives from the two levels of government to coordinate the preparedness and response for COVID. And I think finally on resource mobilization, we as the subnational level, we've been engaged in a couple of meetings with the national government to ensure that the resources are allocated, are sent to counties for purposes of handling COVID. Finally, we have a COVID conference on Monday, 31st. I'll share the program on the chat. We will be bringing together stakeholders from both levels of government, from civil society, practitioners, to basically reflect on government action for the past 6 months, to look at the impacts COVID has had on several sectors like agriculture, like health, like the environment, and to take stock of the impact of COVID and agree on some policy and legislative measures that we can adopt for purposes of ensuring sustainability of systems moving forward. So I'll share the program. I invite all of us to join the conference. It will be on Monday. It starts at 9 a.m. We'll have the president opening the conference and closing it for us. So thank you, Henry. And thank you, Henry. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Rosemary, and thanks to the other participants that are yet to speak. I just want to mention that we're running a bit behind time, and we just needed to keep it very precise and also focus on just telling us how COVID has impacted your work. So next in line, we have Johnson from Liberia. Samuel?
Thank you very much, Henry. I'm Samuel Fayad Johnson from Liberia. I serve as Capacity Building Officer in the Governance and Decentralization Unit, and my work focuses on enhancing the leadership, management, and governance capacities of health management teams and governance boards at the decentralized level. So, as you are aware, Liberia was one of the countries hugely affected by the Ebola in 2014 in West Africa. So when COVID hit on March 16, 2020, we exerted all efforts to ensure that we needed to show the world that from our previous experience, we were prepared to combat the pandemic. However, COVID has impacted our work, particularly in the unit, for the fact that we were just about to roll out our decentralized governance and management operational guidelines, which standardize the operational procedures of governance boards across the country when COVID hit. So that activity has now been suspended and all resources are now being pulled towards the response. Also, COVID has exposed some gray areas in emergency preparedness and surveillance response of the counties across the country. And we've also seen that there's still lack of community trust in the health system's ability to provide adequate healthcare. And that was also seen during the Ebola, where there were several denials, which led to the spread of the Ebola. COVID reinforces the need for the Ministry of Health to further strengthen governance across the country and restore or bolster the community's trust in our health system. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We move on to the next participant, who is Samia. Samia? Just try and keep it as brief as you can. Your name, your country, the organization you're working in, the capacity you're working in, and how COVID has impacted your work. Samia from Tunisia. Leanne Bukuru from Burundi, are you ready to share your comments? If Leanne is not available at the moment, Joseph Akage from South Sudan. Joseph?
Good evening, all.
Oh, good evening, Leanne.
Yes, can you hear me? I'm sorry, my network is not stable. My name is Leyan Bukuru. I'm one of the participants. I have been honored when I have been selected for this program. I'm from Burundi and I'm studying my Master's in International Business Law in Uganda. Turn right onto Kira Road. The impact of COVID on my work, it's like I had planned when I came Jan 2020, and then when this pandemic started, I had to stop studying. So it was a bit hard, and
Sorry, it looks like we've lost Leanne. We hope she can be able to come back on. Is Joseph Akage still online? All right, now I think we need to move on to the next session. Thank you all for the participants and for sharing your comments about how COVID-19 has impacted your work. Now I want to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Michelle Maziwiza, to take us forward on the next session.
Good afternoon. This is really an exciting day to get to meet all of you and see some of your faces, even if it's virtual. So my name is Michelle Maziwiza, as Henry has said, and I'm going to moderate this session. We will have 5 presenters on the panel, and I have to kindly ask the presenters to reduce their time to 5 minutes, if possible, instead of 7 minutes, in the interest of time. And without further ado, let me introduce Professor Nico Statler. He's the chair in multi-level government law and development under the South African Research Chairs Initiative. He's also the former director of the Dalla Oma Institute, and he has been involved in the development of the new constitutional order. And in this regard, he has played a pivotal role as a technical advisor to the Constitutional Assembly during the drafting of the South African Constitution, as well as the Western Cape Provincial Legislature in drafting the provincial constitution. Professor Nico Statler, I give you 5 minutes. And when you have 1 minute left, I will just indicate to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me just try to get myself organized here for a quick write. Is that shared? We all got that?
Not yet.
My PowerPoint.
We have it now.
Okay, fantastic. Let me just get slideshow. Okay, okay. Okay. Okay, very brief. One, just look at the figures. These came out yesterday, or from yesterday. Over 1 million infections, deaths close to 30,000. This is now for the whole of Africa. Recoveries nearly 1 million. But this is only half of the picture. There's huge underreporting, and one just thinks of Zimbabwe, where if you want to know whether you've got infected by COVID, you have to pay $65 US to have the test. So even South Africa, the figure is very much underreported. But what is also quite significant is just coming out yesterday was that there is this downward trend. 4% decrease in new infections, 12% decrease in deaths. And the decreases are coming in countries which are the most infected, and the numbers there are quite significant. Key to what we are facing now, no longer the infection so much, but the economic consequences. Global and national recession taking place, increase in poverty. Calculations are that it pushed 27 million people into extreme poverty in sub-Saharan Africa. The immediate impacts are hardest felt in the urban sector, in informal in the urban areas and informal sector, and that overall Africa is in recession, contracting. The economy is contracting by 3.2%. South Africa, for example, it's going to be closer to 10. So here is the picture that you see, a very different one in terms of infections that occurred. Big ones, South Africa, Egypt, Algeria, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Accra in Ghana. So not a uniform picture, but that doesn't tell us the real picture because of underreporting. So if you look at the regions, we see, again, Southern Africa way above the rest of the continent. So the impact has been mostly in Southern Africa. Now, what is the relevance of the pandemic on decentralized governance? It depends here on who are the decision-making dealing with the COVID problems and now the economic fallout. So in the federations that we have a number of, the players, of course, is the federal government, then at the second level, the states, provinces, or counties in Kenya, and then local government. Where there's no federation or multi-level government, we look at central government, local government, and one should not forget traditional authorities, which they play in normal course of event quite an informal but important role. One will have to see what happened during the pandemic. Now, what is the relevance of these decision making? It's of course the types of decisions that they would be making. The declaration of a state of emergency or state of disaster, usually that's a centralized decision. Healthcare are often split. Sometimes your central hospitals are done by the central government, but they can also be produced or provided by subnational governments. We'll hear more about that in our case studies. Then, of course, the control of movement and activities, economic activities in particular, who makes those decisions. And then the social services, they are usually provided by both the central government and local government. And the issue will there be about intergovernmental relations that has already been mentioned. And then the economic activities, industry, trade, informal trade, markets, etc., becomes key. Now, what has been the impact of COVID and the pandemic and the actions taken by government on the functioning of subnational governments? Now, the first thing that we have to look at is, has there been a process of centralization, that activities previously done by local government or states are now done by the central government? Also, has there perhaps been shifting of responsibilities away from the center? Let local government look after this. So that's the issue. The second one would be, have subnational governments been innovative in their response, first to the pandemic, to the health response, and secondly, to the economic problems that occurred. So this is a theme that one will be very alert to. And then I think the big one at the moment is the financing of subnational governments. And we heard already from our colleagues in Ghana and in Eswatini, this is going to be the big one. Because what you see now is a demand on subnational governments for increased services, not less, greater need. But now, because of the economic contraction, it has reduced central government revenue. And where subnational governments are dependent upon transfers, it is going to reduce the size of the transfers, which will then leave local governments with a dilemma. They have more to do with less money at hand. And as we heard also from our two colleagues, own source revenue has shrunk. Because
you have a minute left.
And that's my last slide. And I said that is the dilemma that we're sitting with, is own source revenue and reduction in transfers going to put decentralization in a very difficult position. Thank you. And thanks for interrupting me. That's great. Do it so.
Now I feel bad.
No,
Thank you
good.
so much for your presentation.
We need to get through this. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Now we'd like to invite Professor Jaap de Visser. He's the director of the Dalla Oma Institute, and he has done consultancies for many national and international organizations, including South Africa's Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, and the City of Cape Town, the World Bank, and many others. He was also a lead consultant on the Western Cape's Land Use Planning Act and the review of the Lesotho Local Governments Act under a contract with the UNDP. Professor Jaap, I'll give you 5 minutes as well if you can manage. And just a reminder to the participants, please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat group, and we'll also have a question and answer session after the presentations. Professor Jaap?
Thank you very much, Michelle. So let me get straight into it and not waste any time. So South Africa has 3 levels of government: national government, provincial government, and local government, all guaranteed their roles and responsibilities in the Constitution. And obviously COVID-19 had a major disruptive effect on life in South Africa, on governance, and also on multi-level government, and the role and function of these three levels and the tasks that they had to take on in response to the pandemic. Because of the way the Constitution organizes responsibilities across the three levels of government, the provinces played a very important role in the health response, because hospitals fall under the provincial government. Testing was also done by provinces. Provinces also had to implement the rules and regulations with regard to schools and the reopening and closing of schools. And of course also had to bat for their own provinces and defend their provincial economies in the response to COVID-19. In general, though, the response has been very centrally coordinated and quite centrally orchestrated by the national government. They established a so-called national coordinating or national command council, the disaster management structure, which essentially at some point became so important that people started questioning its legal and constitutional status. But they were basically instructing provinces what to do and when to do it. In general, the response has been coordinated and uniform. We have a so-called risk-adjusted strategy, which in principle allows for different alert levels and different levels of lockdown for different provinces and different municipalities. However, that kind of differentiation has never happened, and the lockdown levels have always been uniform across the country, and have also always been uniform in terms of what sectors were affected. To give you an example, the alcohol ban, which was one of the sort of famous or infamous elements of our lockdown, impacted, of course, the whole country, but particularly the Western Cape, which is, hopefully you will come and enjoy it, is a region where lots of wine is manufactured and grown and produced, and it's a huge export revenue source for this province. So this province was very vocal in trying to get the national government to let go of the alcohol ban, not necessarily because we love alcohol so much, but because it's a major economic factor in this province. So there were those dynamics in the debates around COVID-19. Then local government was hard hit by COVID-19. A lot of its existing functions, for example, law enforcement, water, sanitization, and regulating local trade, suddenly took on a whole different dimension. Traffic officers had to help enforce the lockdown. Municipalities had to provide emergency water responses where people didn't have access to water to allow them to sanitize. So there were a lot of existing functions that were intensified. And then there were new functions for local government. Suddenly they found themselves having to provide emergency food relief to people who really had nowhere else to go but to the municipality and ask for food relief. So food parcels suddenly became a responsibility for local government. So these things impacted obviously on the way local government responded. And again, to end off with the same comment that Nico made, the financial consequences are the most important and the most spoken about at the moment when it comes to local government. The economic ruin that this pandemic has caused, I think we haven't seen the end of it yet. The impact of the lockdown was severe, but also the increase in poverty as a result of the lockdown and of the downward spiral of the economy impacts local government because of the reduced collection of fees and taxes, but also for an increased demand on local government to provide basic services for free to people who really cannot afford to pay for their services. The government has promised a little bit of relief. 20 billion rand has been set aside for local government, which is far too little. So we will see the effects of this pandemic on the financing of local government for some time to come. And I think it's going to require a lot of innovation and also perhaps the revisiting of the intergovernmental fiscal framework to mitigate the impact of this pandemic on national and provincial and also local government. But of course, we are doing much better in terms of the infection rates. So we seem to have been past the worst of it. And now obviously the main task is to avoid second and third waves of the pandemic. But the infection rates have come down and are stabilizing. So in that sense, we are on the right track, but the effects will be felt for a very long time. Thanks, Michelle. I hope that was more or less within 5 minutes.
Yes, Prof, it was just about right. Thank you so much for sharing those insights on some of the challenges that have been experienced so far in South African local government and some of the opportunities there. I'll take the opportunity now to welcome Professor Ayele. Professor Zemelak Ayele is the director for the Center for Federal and Governance Studies in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And he's also an extraordinary professor at the Dalla Oma Institute. He's published widely in the area of decentralization and federalism in Ethiopia and in Africa, including on local government in Ethiopia and in accommodating ethnic minorities. Professor Ayele, I'll give you 5 minutes as well. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. I have PowerPoint, but if I try to share it, probably my computer is going to stuck, so I will just present without the slide. So let me go straight to the issue. COVID-19, the first case was reported on 13th of March, and since then it has been growing. The infection rate has been high, and still we haven't even reached the peak, and every day there are reports of about 1,000 infections every day, and so far about 50,000 people have been tested and found to have the virus, and over 700 people have died, and this despite the fact there is a very low rate of testing because of lack of testing kit and all that. The epicenter of the virus is Addis Ababa. Over 70% of those who have been found to be infected by the virus are found in Addis Ababa. Regarding federalism and COVID-19, both the federal government and the state governments have some role to play in terms of containing pandemic. Because one thing, health issue or are concurrent powers on which both federal government and state government can adopt policies and pass legislation. Plus, the federal government has extra responsibility in terms of controlling port of entries like airport and other ports of entry into the country, and by way of administering those, it exercises some kind of control over who can come in and out, and thereby also try to control the spread of the pandemic. The other competence managed from the power of the two levels of government to declare a state of emergency when pandemic emerges. Now, when it comes to the responses of the two levels of government to the virus, the federal government has taken different measures. It started by making or taking temperature checks at the airport. Then it decided to close even the border, to suspend flights, to close the schools, and to put people who enter into the country under mandatory quarantine. And later it also decided to tell all federal employees to work from home, except those who are essential workers. The states were a bit slow in terms of catching up with the virus, or in terms of responding to the virus. This is perhaps because the federal government was run for the past 30 or something years in a very centralized manner, and there is this tendency to wait for the federal government to do something or to order to do something. So they did not respond. The exception in this regard is Tigray region, which is found in the northern part of Ethiopia. that state declared its own state of emergency and also imposed mandatory quarantine on everyone who was coming into the state. With regard to the economic impact of the economic, social, and political impact of COVID-19 thus far, the economic impact is that the GDP of the country, according to World Bank and United Nations, Ethiopia, has dropped by 4%. Over 400,000 jobs have been lost. And absolute poverty, they predict to have increased at least by 2 million people. When it comes to the political impact of the COVID-19, the major one is that it has forced the country to postpone its sixth national election, which has caused a lot of constitutional and political debate in the country. There was a debate regarding whether the federal government could postpone the election, and if so, who is going to run the country until the next election is held. And the matter was taken to the House of Federation, which is in charge of interpreting the Constitution, and the House of Federation decided that the election could be postponed indefinitely, and the current parliament can run the country, can govern the country until the next election is held. And this decision is found by many, it has kind of become a popular decision, especially because it has not limited any condition on how the government can run the country during the extended period. On the other hand, Tigray region has decided to disagree with the decision of the House of Federation. And by the way, the House of Federation has extended the term of the state councils. So Tigray region said, no, we're not going to extend our terms. We are going to hold the election at regional level. This is despite the fact that under the Constitution, regional states do not have the power to make law with regard to election, and also despite the fact that it is only the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia which is supposed to administer election. They just established their own electoral board, and they have now scheduled to hold the election on the 9th of September. This has created friction between the federal government and the Tigray state government, and there was even some threat of some kind of armed intervention, or despite the fact that the Prime Minister was saying, I will intervene, not but in any manner that involves violence. Still, in any case, there is tension. The other thing, the COVID-19 has exposed, there was an argument even before that the constitutional interpretation mechanism that we have is flawed because it gives the power to do so to a political organ. Now it has become clear that this political organ was actually deciding constitutional issues based on political consideration, and it has become now clear that there is a need to revise the Constitution in order so that some other independent institution could be in charge of umpiring constitutional dispute. The last one is the absence of Igr forums and how the COVID-19 has made it clear that the absence of such forums have made coordination of activities between the federal government and the state basically impossible. Before, there was a ruling party, a very centralized ruling party called the PRDF, which could take care of this kind of stuff between federal and regional government through the party structure. That party is no longer. Now with the party no longer, and in the absence of Igr, there was a problem of coordination of activities between the federal government and the states, and this has made it clear that there is a need to create Igr forums in Ethiopia. Let me stop here. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Professor Zemelak. Very interesting insights from Ethiopia on the political side of things. There's so much happening there. You could start your own TV series. Now I'd like to just welcome Dr. John Mutaha Kangu. Dr. Kangu is an advocate of the Kenyan High Court and a lecturer at Moi University School of Law. He's also a constitutional expert, and his work focuses on constitutional theory, constitutional architecture and design, and he's a former researcher at the Dalla Oma Institute. Dr. Kangu has published widely on governance-related issues, including in his recent book on constitutional law in Kenya and devolution. Dr. Kangu, I will give you 5 minutes. Please go ahead. And may I also kindly ask, yeah, okay, dealt. Thank you. Please go ahead. Please may you put your microphone on.
Is it on now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Please
fine. Thank you very much, Michelle, and the participants. Is the video on?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. Kenya, like the rest of the countries in Africa, has been impacted by the pandemic, and from 15th March of this year, the government took drastic measures of limiting movement and a lot of activities. And that has had a very serious impact in various respects. But if we focus on devolution, we need to again note that this was happening in a context of the country counting 10 years with the constitution that introduced the devolved system of government. Only yesterday, our constitution turned 10 years, and therefore, even as we look at the impact arising from COVID, the Kenyan people were already starting to look at the constitution and ask themselves, how far have we gone in the past 10 years? How have we made, have we succeeded the way we intended or not? And from the COVID, we may learn both positive lessons and have negative impacts. And we will need to look at that. And so from a functional point of view, COVID being a health question, it quickly enabled the two levels of government to, I think, start relooking at the issue of intergovernmental relations. In just a short span of a few months, the summit, which brings together the national government and the county government, was convened up to about 4 or 5 times for the president to sit with the governors of the counties to discuss the response to the COVID consequences. And in my view, intergovernmental relations is one of the issues that were really suffering under our new constitution. And I want to think that as a country, we need to draw positive lessons and say that just the same, the way the two levels were willing to convene each other and sit and discuss, if only we could be able to build on that, we would be able to enhance our intergovernmental relations and be able to help how the country is governed. Number two, the COVID response, as I have said, required concerted efforts from both levels of government, but it also posed dangers of re-centralization, as Professor Nico Statler mentioned, that we saw the national government playing a more central role than the county governments, to a point where you would see that even as the summit was meeting, just making decisions, but at the level of implementation, people were not seeing much on the ground being done by the county governments. And so the danger of re-centralization is something we need to be careful about to avoid allowing what started because of COVID to continue, and then we undermine the system. Number three, it also raised the question of preparedness on the part of the county governments to deliver health services. And that is something those who have been pushing for decentralization of health services could easily want to use to advance their argument, which will be undermining devolution, and lessons must be drawn to continue building the capacities of the county governments to be able to deliver on their health services. Now, as the rest have pointed out, the question of financing devolution has been a very, very hot issue in Kenya. In fact, in the midst of the COVID, we have had the passing of the formula for sharing of revenue among the counties in the Senate being adjourned 9 times. And one should be able to bear in mind that this is happening at a time when central government, national government was already saying that the resources available are not enough. And so we are likely to see more fights on finances as we move into the future, especially given that the COVID interventions that locked down the country and the economy is really going to affect the available resources for running government at both levels. And so those fights are likely to increase. And one just prays that the levels of government see the positive side, especially on intergovernmental relations, and try to negotiate on some of these things in a more friendly manner. Then we have already heard from the speaker, from the kinds of governors, that the COVID has affected public participation quite fundamentally. And that, in effect, is going to undermine accountability by both levels of government, because they are now able to make a lot of decisions that otherwise would have required public participation without conducting any meaningful public participation. And if we don't watch on this, the progress that was being made on the subject of public participation may be undermined. And so we really have to guard against that and draw lessons as we move forward. And back on the economy has been severely affected because the lockdowns, the entertainment industry was totally locked down. The schools, the universities were all closed. And therefore, a lot of family businesses literally closed down. Many families that were in the hotel industry, the liquor industry, the bars and all that have closed down. And going forward, both levels of government are going to find themselves having to deal with very, very serious social problems, with the demands by people who want support, financial support, and so on. And there is need, therefore, for the governments to think through this and work together to address the issues. Just recently, farmers, as Yap mentioned, in Western Cape, our major breweries, I saw recently when farmers were complaining that the breweries had told them they were not going to purchase barley from them. And the farmers are now finding themselves with barley and they don't know what to do. And so the two levels of government will need to ask themselves, how do we step in? Is there a way to assist? Because previously they have assisted cereals farmers by government purchasing from farmers. I don't know whether this is going to be the same, even with the barley, and of course, many other products, because the schools and hotels are not purchasing things from farmers, and farmers are reeling under serious financial problems. And the two levels of government will need to think through, especially given that agriculture under our system has been devolved to the county governments. And so for me, it is something we really need to learn from and be able to draw, make decisions that take us forward in a better way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. It's unfortunate that the entertainment industry lockdowns are also now affecting the long value chain all the way from the producers, especially in the agricultural sector. Thank you for your presentation. We'll now invite Ms. Pumla Tlati to make her presentation. Ms. Tlati is a doctoral researcher at the Dala Omar Institute. She has been working on economic development and local economic development for 15 years. She has worked for various national government departments as well as the Eastern Cape provincial government and has conducted LED advisory consultancies. She is also the former Chief Director of Economic Development in the Ministry of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, where she was responsible for LED policy and practice. Ms. Tlati, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Michelle. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. And your presentation.
Okay, and the video, yes. Is the presentation? Okay. All right, thank you very much, Michelle, and greetings to everybody. So I think the preceding presentations by the speakers kind of set the tone for what I want to talk about. Basically, it all comes down to the question of, with all these challenges that we're facing nationally and locally, what can local governments do, or are local governments going to become more important as we move forward in terms of economic or socio-economic responses? So Michelle has given me only 5 minutes, so I'm going to skip on some of these sections because luckily Prof. Statler and Prof. Deficere have already touched on this. So I thought what I would start off with though is to just say, if we're asking the question, what could be the role of local government in economic development, in the socio-economic recovery post-COVID, what enablers are there in terms of legislation and policies? So I think I would just summarize this slide by saying that it is common cause, or it's commonly known, that South Africa has one of the most enabling legislation, frameworks, policies, for local governments to participate in local economic development in terms of the objectives of local government, the developmental duties of municipalities, the powers and functions of local government. Earlier on, Professor Statler asked the question, who makes the decisions? So local governments in South Africa have the power to set up bylaws, to regulate trade, and so forth, to manage local tourism. The role of the municipal executive committees, the role of executive mayors, it sets out prescripts around economic development. We also have integrated development planning. So the point really is that, at least on paper, you find that there isn't so much a question of can local governments in South Africa do local economic development. And I think one of the most definitive documents in the country that set out a clear role for local governments in LED is our white paper on local government. And I'm not even going to go through this except to point out that really it provides extensive examples of what local governments can do to influence local economic development. But the white paper sets out very strongly that local government itself is not directly responsible for creating jobs. It is responsible for ensuring that active steps are taken to promote or to set up a conducive environment for local economic development. So the next question then is, what has been the practice so far in terms of local economic development in the country? Firstly, there have been pockets of good LED practice, and we find that where this is the case, leadership has been key. There have been different approaches across municipalities. Some take a pro-poor stance, some take a pro-growth stance, but there are issues of financing LED. There are questions around whether LED is an unfunded mandate, and then there's the issue of the IGR environment as well, with the three tiers of government. So there are ongoing challenges. I suppose that is really the main point there. And if you ask, then Prof. Statler spoke to this, so I'm not really even going to go to it. But the point is, there have been challenges in the economy in terms of because of COVID, and national government as well as local government have responded. National government has set out this document called Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. It's still a proposed document, but equally, the Ministry of Local Government has set out also its own document, and I put a question mark there because the question is, what is the coherence between the two? As to what local governments can do going forward, I have key messages at the bottom there. Firstly, that is to get the basics right, to get the governance right, to differentiate, because municipalities are not the same. Inclusivity is key at this point because we've got the informal sector, we've got youth unemployment and women particularly. Localize, accelerate and intensify, as well as private sector partnerships. But then there've also been a number of questions as to really, is this possible? Because there are views that local governments that have less fiscal autonomy, which is not South Africa, this doesn't really speak to South Africa, have different challenges when it comes to local economic development versus those like South Africa with greater autonomy with respect to local economic development. So in conclusion, Chair, I want to point out just key considerations when you ask the question, do local governments have or are they going to have a more central role going forward in economic recovery? Fragmentation and issues of leadership at all levels continue in the country in as far as coherence in policies and legislation. We have historical and ongoing local government capacity and governance challenges. Financing economic recovery at the local level is still going to be an issue. And then of course, there's the issue of bottom-up planning, which I think the previous speaker spoke to this, that public participation is affected. And there's still this issue of incoherence. You've got national plans versus local plans. So I think I would conclude with that, Chair. I think my 5 minutes is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pumla. That was very insightful. There's definitely a lot to unpack there about the local economy. So now we're going to open up the questions. Thank you so much to all the panelists for your contributions so far. We're just going to invite the participants. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat group and also to raise your hand. May I kindly ask Pumla to switch off your video? And it's okay. And in the meantime, there are a few questions that are already on the chat. While we're waiting for more questions, there's a question in relation to the autonomy of local governments. So the question is, how do we limit responsibilities between central, regional, and local authorities in terms of measures to contain COVID? And how do we give local authorities responsibility of making decisions during the lockdown, especially, and homogenization of decisions within the same government? So I think that's in relation to the autonomy, first of all, and the coordination in the local government response. And the second question is in relation to the African School on Decentralization and whether there is any existing relationship with the African Union, considering the African Union Charter on Decentralization. If any of the panelists can take one or two of those questions. And the chat is open. If you have any questions, please feel free to put your questions there or to raise your hand.
Well, I may just try the first question, the first two. The one is and in the question, there's also a question of homogeny versus differentiation. And I think that's one of the key questions that needs to be asked. If there's a level of autonomy of local government, whether they can decide now particularly how you slowly ease your restrictions and move out the lockdown. And that's been a question, I think, in Europe, where it was very often allowed that at your subnational levels of government, there can be a local decision that our infection rate is low, our transmission rate is very low, we can go out. We can come out and go back to normal. So we have to see, well, only if there's some recognition of autonomy, one can start working with the idea of a differentiated approach, particularly now moving out of lockdown, so that we don't have to be treated all exactly the same. And by the same token, if you have autonomy, now coming with economic development and initiatives, the ones that Pumla suggested, again, you need a level of autonomy to make plans, to be innovative and experimental. The last point on the African School of Decentralization, the AU, we are in contact with the AU. Part of the objective of the ASD is precisely to advance the African Charter on decentralization and local government, and that will be part of all our trainings. We certainly are fully behind that charter.
Thank you very much, Prof. Statler. Henry, I think I will pass on the second question on the ASD again when you're concluding the program. We've got additional questions in the chat room. The first one is asking, how is participatory planning at the local government level carried out in South Africa before? So how was it carried out before the COVID-19 pandemic? I think I will direct this question perhaps to Professor Yap. And the second question that's in the group is that the key questions on intergovernmental relations and financing thereof remain a serious thorn. I just wanted to know from either Professor Statler or Dr. Mutaha if it adds value to have intergovernmental relations anchored on the national constitution. In some of the African countries, the relations are not governed by legislation, which makes it difficult to enforce. Prof. Yap, please feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, a good question about participatory planning at local government level. There's a very comprehensive and detailed legal framework for participatory planning in local government level in South Africa. So it's compulsory for all municipalities to, when they prepare for the adoption of their annual budget, that they go through a very comprehensive strategic planning exercise once every 5 years, and that they revisit this every year, where they put together a so-called integrated development plan, which must speak to all the priorities that must go into the budget, the infrastructure plans of the municipality, where it is going to build what, how it's going to address inequalities within the municipality, and what are sort of key projects in the next 5 years. And this must be revisited every year, and this must inform the budget. And very importantly, this must be done together with citizens. So councillors and municipal officials will go out at least once or twice a year into a sort of project of engaging with each and every ward in the municipality to collect priorities and find out from residents what is it that we need to do, what are the needs and wishes and concern in this municipality that must be collected, must be prioritized. Of course, not everything can be done, not everything can be met, but feedback must be given to those communities later on in the budget cycle to explain what projects, what initiatives and suggestions were taken on board into the budget and which ones were not. So that's the formal picture. So formally, it's in place. So there's a legal framework and municipalities must do it. However, the complaint across the board is that it has very much become a tick box exercise where municipal councillors and officials go through the motions because it is required, because the law says it must be done. We make sure we have the meeting, we take an attendance register, we make sure there's coffee and tea, and then we have a few questions, and then we all go home, and then we've done public participation, which sort of does not really take into account the complexities of community engagement, how to best get input from communities on a municipal budget. It also sometimes is a bit unrealistic and a bit deceiving sometimes, even when a municipality presents itself to a community saying, well, tell us what you need. And then you get a long list of wishes. And then actually you can only implement a small, tiny fraction of those needs and priorities. Because a lot what goes into the municipal budget is already predetermined. Multi-year plans is tied to multi-year grants. In fact, the autonomy of municipalities may be great on paper, but sometimes is quite compromised when you look at where the money comes from, particularly for development infrastructure. So there are lots of questions and debates around, yes, we have a great legal framework and a progressive policy on public participation. We even have ward committees where community members, together with their ward councillor, inform municipal priorities. But is it really working in practice? And there's still a lot of work to be done to improve that system. But I'm sure once we have the opportunity to get together and meet physically, we can discuss this in much more detail. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Indeed, Prof. Yap, these are very interesting discussions that just get us even more excited about meeting in person next year. There's so much still to talk about. Dr. Motaka, if you're still on the line, would you be able to respond to the question on intergovernmental relations being anchored to the national constitution?
Yes, thank you. Now, I need to start by first recognizing that intergovernmental relations is a very necessary tool of running government where you have a devolved system or a federal system, so to speak, because it is the mechanism for managing the necessary tensions that will obviously be there when you have two or more levels of government. But as to whether it should be in the constitution will have to be determined or looked at from one country to the other, so that if a country has adopted its devolution or federalism through the national constitution, then in my view, intergovernmental relations will be an important aspect that ought to be given space in that constitution. But if a country is running a decentralized system that is anchored in mere legislation, it might be very difficult to only provide for intergovernmental relations in the constitution when the other aspects of the decentralization are not provided for in the constitution. But where it's in the constitution, my answer would be you are better off making some provision about it in the constitution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. And I think I'm going to take the very last question, which is the International Budget Partnership a partner organization for the ASD? I will allow Henry to respond to that at the end. Unfortunately, it's 4 o'clock and my hands are a little bit tied. I don't want to keep you here on a Friday afternoon. So I think on that note, thank you very much to all our participants, and thank you so much to our speakers. Yeah, this is exciting, and we hope that next year will be even more exciting and we'll have time to engage further in these conversations. Handing over to you, Henry.
Thanks a lot, Michelle, and thanks a lot to all the facilitators for sharing the insights about the case studies. These are some of the persons and professionals that we had lined up for the school, and we just had an opportunity to hear from them, and we still have an opportunity to hear from them again next year. Now, we had mentioned at the start that we will like to hear from you at the end of this session. And I have just shared a link on the chat. Please go to the chat box. I've shared a link. Click on the link. Tell us what your opinion has been and what your thoughts have been about the event, and any other comments you may have about the event and generally about the African School on Decentralization next year. It's going to take you less than a minute, less than 2 minutes for you to be able to complete filling that questionnaire. And please take the moment now to do it. In the meantime, I would respond to questions about the partnerships with the African Union, which Prof sufficiently responded to, and the International Budget Partnership. These are organizations which rightfully pointed out are central to decentralization in Africa, and we appreciate you pointing out these. And as Prof mentioned, this organization we are in touch with, the African Union was very much on board and was very much interested. They were already working on including the African School on Decentralization on their work plan for April and June, just before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened. So we will have to carry on this relationship again next year. And as Prof mentioned, we are all about decentralization in Africa, and the African Charter on Decentralization is very central to this. And therefore, the involvement of the African Union and the Department of Political Affairs at the African Union is of very central interest to us in the hosting of the school. The International Budget Partnership, that is an organization which we are closely working with as the Dalla Omar Institute, and it's an organization which we would also be very interested in talking to in terms of being part of either the facilitation of the course or providing any sort of support that we can be able to get on the course. Now, very important question, especially among our participants, is now what now? Is the webinar the end of the African School on Decentralization, or are we having the African School on Decentralization for next year? So we had mentioned in the emails in our correspondence that we are just postponing it for this year. We are still very much interested in having a physical meetup with all of you and sharing more insights, more experiences, and more cases to learn from each other next year. Hopefully, depending on how the COVID situation goes, as Professor Yap mentioned, there could be a second wave, a third wave maybe, and most countries still have their international airspace locked. But we hope that as time allows, we will be able to communicate latest by February about the plans for next year. But we are very much interested, we're very much on, and we will be in touch with all of you regarding the hosting of the school. I hope we've taken time to please fill in the questionnaire. We will share this questionnaire once again in an email afterwards for those who may not have had a chance to fill it, and for those who, because of internet connectivity issues, were able to come in and out of the meeting. And I understand some of us did not get a chance to speak, but because of time, again, we are really bound to conclude the session. But we hope that we can be able to get an opportunity once again where we can be able to share our experiences and share our mutual interest in furthering decentralization and utilizing decentralization and learning from each other to address some of the challenges that are facing Africa. So the theme still remains the same for next year, decentralization and development, and it's definitely going to be even more relevant next year after the impact of COVID-19. And the venue will still be in Cape Town, and my director has his hand up. Prof, Yep, please feel free to speak.
Can I make a very a small suggestion at the end of the meeting? Would it be possible to take a group picture if everybody that is able to can switch on their videos just for 5 seconds, and I'll take a picture, and at least we've got something to celebrate on social media. I see some faces coming through.
Thank you everyone. Thank you. Please turn on the cameras. It's an important thing that Prof has just reminded us to do.
Yeah, this is looking great. I'll give it a few more seconds.
Thank you, Robertson, if you're there, Charles Chunga, if you're there, Mileva, Jacqueline, Mandy, if you're still there, Dr. Tinashe, if you're still there, please turn on your camera so we can be.
Dr. Tinashe is shy today. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Back to you, Henry. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. That was very important. At least we get to see the faces that we were not able to see. Joseph Akech said that he really wanted an opportunity to speak, but Joseph, we appreciate your presence, and our other colleagues, including from Tunisia, Malawi, Cote d'Ivoire, and South Sudan, were not able to speak, but we appreciate your making time to be with us today. And we also did mention that there are also other partners from CFGF, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and Mozambique, who are part of this session but were not able to get a chance to be able to speak, but we appreciate you making time to be with us here today. And that we've received suggestions and requests to host a more open forum on decentralization and COVID-19 in Africa. It's something we are considering, and should we organize another webinar, we will be very much interested to have you also taking part. So unless anyone has anything that they would really want to say, I think we have come to the end of our webinar today, and we thank you everyone for making this possible. So guests may leave at their pleasure. Oh, Michelle has something.
I'm sorry.
All
There's
right,
a
please don't leave
possibility.
yet.
There's a possibility we may have taken only one screen of people's faces because we have two screens. So I wanted to check with Prof. Yap if you managed to get pictures of both screens.
Oh, now you're being very technical now, Michelle. I just took pictures of the screen in front of me. Whether everybody was there, I'm not sure. But,
no, thank you.
but
I was also able to take the picture for the second screen, Michelle, so I think we are covered.
Wonderful.
Perfect, thanks.
Karine from HSF South Africa also had her hand up. Did you want to say something, Karine?
I was just going to say farewell. Thank you very much to everybody. It was great to meet you. That was just because you were saying we are come to the end of the event. So thank you very much. It was great to come together this way this time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now you may be free to leave the meeting.